The president faces at least two major challenges this week. He is in Poland right now ahead of the G20 summit in Germany, and that's where he is scheduled to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin. That happens on Friday. Looming over the whole trip and over the whole country is North Korea's first successful intercontinental ballistic missile test. Lots to talk about with Fareed Zakaria, host of Fareed Zakaria GPS. In some ways, the intercontinental ballistic missile test from North Korea is the first real international crisis the president has had to face. We learned a lot about presidential leadership at moments like these. What do you think we're going to learn about the president in the coming days?
Well, we really don't know. You're absolutely right. And so I think it's fair to say that on the basis of what we know from in the past, what you've seen from President Trump is somewhat impulsive. You know, the tweets come immediately in a way that isn't quite disciplined. That's not necessarily all bad. You know, it could be unpredictability is helpful. What worries me about it is this is one of those cases where the United States actually has very limited leverage. The United States does not have much of a military option. The South Koreans wouldn't go for it, and they are the battlefield in a sense. And it would cause an enormous conflagration. So when you're looking at it diplomatically, you really have to get all your ducks in a row. You've got to get to the Chinese, and they are the absolute key. But you've also got to talk to the South Koreans, the Japanese, the Russians. You know, it's a kind of complicated minuet. And in that process, you have to be very consistent.
His meeting with Vladimir Putin. How important do you think the first impressions that these men make with each other will be in what could be a 4 or 8 year relationship?
My great worry about Donald Trump in this regard is, partly his skill and success, which is he's a good salesman. He's a good negotiator, clearly in the private sector. If you think about his ability to create his brand and sell it, and if when I've met him personally, you get that feel. You understand why he's charismatic. The problem is foreign policy is very rarely just about that personality interface. As he learned, I think, with the Xi Jinping situation. Mm-hmm. I think he thought, I gave this guy a great welcome in Mar-a-Lago, gave him a great piece of chocolate cake. He says the most beautiful piece of chocolate cake you've ever seen. And suddenly, China was going to pressure North Korea in a way they hadn't for 25 years. No. China has permanent interests with regard to North Korea that are very hard to move. I think this, similarly with Putin, the most important thing to remember about Putin is above all a Russian nationalist. He believes in following Russia's national interest as he sees it, and he's very clear about it. He's very defined. He's actually quite intelligent about it. I've always struck, when you talk to him, he has a very consistent, very logical way of thinking about things from Russia's point of view.
So the G7 meeting that took place in Italy, the meeting with NATO leaders, controversial, rocky from some perspective. How much of U.S. standing is on the line this week with the G20?
I think that there are a number of countries that have begun to say things similar to what Angela Merkel said I think it was yesterday, which is that the United States sees the world very differently than we do. We have to, in a sense, chart our own course. There are other leaders who have made similar kinds of observations. The Foreign Minister of Canada gave a speech saying it is now up to Canada to defend the liberal international order since the United States is not going to do it.
Do you think we will have a better sense, the other G20 nations, the nations of the world will have a better sense of what America first means by the end of this week?
Yeah, I think that the truth about Trump is he's pretty transparent. I don't think he's going to go and it's going to be complicated diplomatic language and, kind of minuets. He can't help himself. He says what he thinks, and, he's in those NATO meetings and all he can talk about is you guys don't pay your bills. When he talks to Merkel, he says, you didn't pay your bills. You're too tough on trade with us. You don't get the sense of this is a guy who thinks that, but can say, wonderful to meet you, Madam Chancellor. I reaffirm our historic relationship between our two countries. That's not Donald Trump. What you see is what you get.
Maybe he brings a lot of chocolate cake. Fareed Zakaria, very big week. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Coming up for us, 44 states and the District of Columbia saying not so fast to the Trump administration's Voter Fraud Commission. The panel is asking for certain personal information on pretty much every voter in the country. We're going to hear from one Republican Secretary of State who says the request is just part of a political game when 360 continues. For a president who has seen major Western counterparts begin distancing themselves from Washington over the last several months, Joining us, retired Rear Admiral John Kirby, who served as the State Department and Pentagon spokesperson during the Obama administration. David Gergen, who has been there in the room during countless crises dating back to the Nixon administration. Also, former Obama National Security Council member Shamila Chaudhry. David, I want to start with you here. I count three, at least, major issues facing the president: the North Korea missile test, his meeting with Vladimir Putin, and the array of allies that are wary about the U.S. role in the world going forward. Any one of these issues would be all-encompassing at a G20 summit. Now President Trump has to deal with all three. How important is the way he navigates the next few days?
These are probably the most important international meetings that he's going to have the first couple of years in office, because everyone is still taking a measure of Donald Trump as a world leader, and whether he's really going to retreat from the stage, as he's given all sorts of indications he would in terms of international collaboration, or whether he's going to be able to persuade others who are not in his corner to take tougher actions against North Korea. He's going to have a tough conversations with the Chinese, because he's very disappointed and they've grown angry at his responses to it. He's going to have very tough and most anticipated meetings with Putin there, and because Putin is a master manipulator, and Donald Trump thinks he is, and they may well clash. We'll have to wait and see. But then again, this is the first time I can remember a president going to a meeting in Europe with our European friends of old, in which he's getting a frosty reception from the most important and most powerful player in Europe, Angela Merkel of Germany, who is very unhappy with, loved Obama and is very unhappy with Trump. This could be a fractious meeting, and it could come out without a lot of progress on the issue that the Americans consider so important, North Korea, because there's going to be pushback from the Chinese and the Russians against the U.S. position that we've got to get a lot tougher.
Admiral Kirby, on the issue of the meeting with Vladimir Putin, different audiences, right? There's the U.S. domestic audience, heavily politicized over this meeting. You have the Russian audience, and then you have the rest of the world leaders watching to see how tough this president is willing to be with Russia. Perception matters in diplomacy and politics here. How do you think the president wants to be perceived here?
I think he wants to come off of this meeting being able to say that he reset, maybe that's not the best verb, but he certainly got the U.S.-Russia bilateral relationship into a better place, or at least the beginnings of a better place, sort of moving it forward in a positive direction. I think he wants to show that he's not intimidated by President Putin, that he is willing to meet eye to eye with him and be strong. But I don't think that we're going to see a lot of tangible results out of this, John. I think they'll come out of this thing and they'll say, look, we had a constructive meeting, we talked about a lot of things, some things we disagree on. Our teams are now going to go back and sort of work on issues going forward. I don't think you're going to see a lot of real results here, but I do think first meeting as president with Putin, I think this is a key opportunity for him to lay down some markers. You're not going to achieve deals, but you do have an opportunity to make some strong points to Putin of things that we're not going to tolerate, things that we can work together on, we're willing to, and things that we're just going to have to have our teams work even harder on.
Shamila, you see the G20 summit is a possible pivot point for the entire presidency here. There are a number of nations, U.S. allies, waiting to see which way this administration will go. And you think it's possible that some of these leaders will make their judgment on how the next 4 or 8 years will be based on the next 2 days?
I agree. And in fact, let's remember that this isn't Trump's first engagement on the international stage. He did meet with NATO leaders in May, and he spoke to them in quite a condescending way, and they were not happy with him. And so the way that they respond to him and publicly message on the issues they disagree with him on, such as climate change or Syria or North Korea, will be indicative of the decisions they've already made during that time from May until now, and how they plan to treat the Trump administration. And I do think that they've moved beyond, trying to figure out what Trump means by his tweets and what his plans are. And we can judge Merkel's response in that vein, that she's been giving him kind of these chilly vibes from across the ocean. And we should anticipate that when he attends these meetings. That being said, there will be other countries there, such as Saudi Arabia, India, Australia, who actually do like Trump's populist rhetoric because it appeals to certain domestic sentiments that they want to tap into at home. And so we might see some favorable views of Trump coming out of the trip. And in particular, I think Poland will be very positive on Trump. The far-right government there is a fan of his, and there will be people there supporting him very vocally during his time there. So I think that we'll see a mixture of response to Trump.
And Shamila, the Poland visit is fascinating in and of itself, right? Poland is a nation with a leader who, as you say, is somewhat Trump-like, or someone that maybe Trump, the president, can identify with. But it's also a nation that juxtaposes itself with Russia, with the former Soviet Union here. Poland and Russia very wary of each other. By going there tomorrow morning and giving what, the White House is billing as a pretty important speech, is the president sending a message to Russia?
He's absolutely sending a message. The Polish government is looking for affirmation from Trump that he will maintain American commitments to NATO. That's in Poland's interest because they're threatened by Russia. It's not that inconsistent with Trump's demeanor so far on Russia. I mean, he has spoken very positively about Putin, but at the same time, he's been inconsistent and he has criticized Russia, and the State Department has taken a hard stance on certain Russian behavior. So I think that's part and parcel of the instability and the unpredictability that Trump wants to generate in his government, and to kind of the foreign governments that he's dealing with. But definitely, I think Poland is playing their cards really well right now.
Admiral Kirby, and obviously the North Korea ICBM test, which may be the most proximate challenge facing the president right now. How much will he have to deal with on the ground there during the G20? How much can he get done on that?
I think it's certainly, look, it's going to be a backdrop issue. There will be plenty of opportunities for him to discuss it. There's no doubt that the Chinese are going to want to talk about this with him, and I'm sure others will as well.
South Koreans, the Japanese, they're all there.
Of course. This will be a major issue he's going to deal with for the whole trip. That said, John, remember the G20s, their agenda is transnational crime, financial regulation, Africa, refugees, lots of issues that they believe can only be solved multilaterally. And of course, this is a president who is all about America first and unilateral solutions or bilateral trade negotiations. So I think there's going to be a real frustration, I think, to get any progress on the agenda of the G20 itself, which is by design multilateral. But clearly, North Korea will be shading all of this.
John Kirby, David Gergen, Shamila Chaudhry, thank you very, very much. Next, we're going to dig deeper on the military options for handling a North Korea with nuclear weapons and perhaps soon a fleet of missiles to put them on. Former Defense Secretary William Cohen joins us. And later, why many states, including plenty of red states, are voicing such objections to the president's election integrity panel.